The open road at night possesses a unique and terrifying quality that few other settings can replicate. It is a world of isolation, where the only illumination comes from the twin beams of your headlights, cutting through the oppressive blackness. The rhythm of the tires on the asphalt can lull a driver into a trance state where reality begins to blur at the edges. In this vulnerable state, the mind plays tricks, or perhaps it simply opens itself to things that are always there, but usually unseen. The darkness outside the car is not empty, but rather it is filled with history and tragedy, and the lingering energy of those who died violently on these very paths. Every mile marker has witnessed something, and some stretches of highway hold onto their memories with a desperate and terrifying grip. Imagine you are driving alone on a desolate 2-lane highway winding through the deep woods, or perhaps skirting the edge of a dark and still lake. The radio signal has faded into static, and silence is your only companion. Suddenly, your high beams catch a flash of pale color on the shoulder of the road ahead. It is out of place in the gloom and distinct against the browns and grays of the landscape. As you draw closer, the shape resolves into the figure of a young woman standing perfectly still. She is not dressed for the weather or the era. She wears a long white dress that seems to glow with its own faint luminescence. She raises a hand, slowly, thumb extended, or perhaps just waving for help. This is the archetype that haunts the American consciousness. The woman in white is perhaps the most pervasive and sorrowful of all highway ghosts. She appears in folklore across the United States, from the winding mountain roads of the Appalachians to the flat, straight stretches of the Midwest. Unlike the violent poltergeists of haunted houses or the demonic entities of possession cases, she is usually not malevolent. She is a figure of profound sadness and confusion, trapped in a loop of her final moments. She is almost always young and beautiful and tragically dead. Her story is one of unfinished business, usually involving a betrayal, a broken heart, or a catastrophic accident on the way to a significant life event like a prom or a wedding. One of the most famous and well-documented instances of this phenomenon is the legend of Resurrection Mary in Justice, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. For decades, drivers traveling along Archer Avenue have reported seeing a young woman with light blonde hair and blue eyes walking along the side of the road. She wears a white party dress and dancing shoes, which are entirely inappropriate for the often freezing Chicago winters. Drivers who stop to offer her a ride find her to be quiet and polite, but strangely cold to the touch. She accepts the ride and gives vague directions, usually asking to be taken up the road. The atmosphere in the car becomes heavy with an unspoken grief as the journey continues. The legend of Resurrection Mary dates back to the 1930s. The story goes that Mary was a young woman who had spent the evening dancing with her boyfriend at the O. Henry Ballroom. At some point in the night, an argument broke out between the couple. Upset and wanting to get away, she left the ballroom and started walking home in the cold night air along Archer Avenue. It was there in the darkness that a driver struck her and fled the scene, leaving her to die on the side of the road. Her parents buried her in Resurrection Cemetery, wearing the white dress and dancing shoes she had worn that fateful night. Since then, she has been trying to get home. In 1939, a man named Jerry Pallas reported one of the most credible encounters with Mary. He claimed to have met a young woman at a dance hall and spent the evening with her. She was cold to the touch and seemed distant, but they danced and spoke for hours. At the end of the night, he offered to drive her home. She directed him to drive along Archer Avenue. As they approached the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, she suddenly became agitated. She told him to stop the car immediately. When he did, she stepped out and ran toward the cemetery gates, vanishing into thin air right before his eyes. Jerry was left alone in the dark, terrified and confused by what he had just witnessed. Another chilling aspect of the Resurrection Mary legend involves a physical trace left behind by the spirit. In the 1970s, a passer-by reported seeing a woman locked inside the cemetery after hours grasping the bars of the main gate. When police arrived to investigate, they found no woman, but they did find something disturbing. Two of the bronze bars on the gate had been bent apart, as if by supernatural strength, and scorched into the metal were the distinct handprints of a woman. These marks remained visible for years, serving as a terrifying, tangible proof for the locals that Mary was still there trying to escape her eternal resting place. Traveling south to Texas, we find another heart-wrenching variation of this legend known as the Lady of White Rock Lake in Dallas. The setting here is a large reservoir surrounded by parkland, which at night transforms from a recreational area into a place of deep shadows and eerie silence. The legend tells of a young woman who drowned in the lake, typically in the 1930s or 40s. Drivers passing the lake late at night report seeing a girl standing by the roadside, dripping wet. Her white dress is soaked and clinging to her shivering frame. She looks lost and desperate, a victim of a tragedy that just occurred moments ago in her mind. The encounter usually follows a strict script. A concerned driver stops to help the soaking wet girl. She climbs into the back seat of the car, trembling violently from the cold. She tells the driver she was in a boating accident and needs to get home immediately. She gives a specific address in the nearby neighborhood of Lakewood, usually on Gaston Avenue. The driver, feeling a sense of urgency, speeds toward the destination, glancing in the rear view mirror to reassure the passenger. She nods silently, water pooling on the upholstery around her. driver focuses on the road, anxious to get this poor girl to safety and warmth. Upon arriving at the address on Gaston Avenue, the driver turns around to tell the girl they have arrived, only to find the back seat empty. The upholstery is still wet, a puddle of lake water remaining where she sat moments before. Confused and frightened, the driver walks up to the house and knocks on the door. An elderly man or couple answers the door, looking weary and sad. When the driver explains that they picked up a young lady who gave this address, the residents shake their heads with a look of familiar sorrow. They explain that their daughter drowned in White Rock Lake years ago, and that the driver is just one of many who have tried to bring her home. This specific narrative structure is known to folklorists as the vanishing hitchhiker, and it taps into a deep human fear of mortality and the abruptness of death. The woman in white is not just a ghost, she is a memory replaying itself. In the case of White Rock, like the repetitive nature of the encounter suggests a spirit that does not realize she has passed. She is caught in the trauma of the drowning, forever seeking the safety of her parents' home, but never being able to cross the threshold. The water left in the car serves as the physical proof that bridges the gap between the supernatural and the real world, making the experience impossible to dismiss as a hallucination. In North Carolina, near Greensboro, there is another famous stretch of road haunted by a woman named Lydia. This legend centers on a bridge in Jamestown. Lydia is said to have been coming home from a dance in the 1920s when she died in a violent car crash on a rainy night. She is often seen on rainy nights flagging down cars for help. She is described as wearing a white evening gown that is now out of style. She is beautiful but frantic, desperate to get out of the rain and back to her home in High Point. Like the others, she vanishes before the car reaches the destination she provides, leaving the driver bewildered. Lydia is unique because she often engages in conversation with the drivers. She talks about her life, her hopes, and the dance she just attended. She seems fully corporeal and alive until the moment of disappearance. Some drivers have even offered her a coat to keep warm when they arrive at the destination and find her gone. They enter the house to return the coat, only to find that the people living there know Lydia well. Sometimes they find their coat draped over the headstone of her grave in a nearby cemetery, a chilling confirmation that their passenger was indeed a visitor from the grave. The consistency of the white dress in these stories is significant. White is the color of purity, but also the color of transitions. It is worn at baptisms, weddings, and in death. The white dress marks the woman as a bride or a debutante, someone on the threshold of a new chapter of life that was violently stolen from her. This creates a deep sense of pathos. We are not afraid of the woman in white in the same way we fear a demon. We pity her, we feel her sorrow, pity turns to terror when the laws of physics are broken, and she vanishes into the ether, proving that death is not the end. Across the country in California, along the winding and treacherous Highway 1, there are reports of a bride who haunts the cliffs near Big Sur. The story claims she was on her way to her wedding when she lost control of her vehicle and plunged into the ocean below. On foggy nights, drivers see a woman in a tattered wedding dress walking along the guardrails, staring out at the dark Pacific Ocean. She does not hitchhike. She simply walks an eternal vigil for the life she never got to live. The sight of her silhouette against the swirling fog is enough to cause drivers to swerve, creating a dangerous cycle where the ghost might cause more tragedies. These apparitions are often tied to specific geographic features like bridges, intersections, or sharp curves. These are liminal spaces, places of transition where the veil between worlds seems thinner. A bridge connects two points of land over a void, just as these spirits are suspended between life and death. An intersection represents a choice, and for these women, the choice was taken from them. The highways themselves are arteries of movement and energy, and perhaps the intense emotional energy released at the moment of a violent death imprints itself onto the environment like a recording on a magnetic tape. The phenomenon is not limited to the mid-century era, although that seems to be the golden age for these stories. There are modern accounts as well. In recent years, drivers on remote roads have reported seeing figures that match the description of the woman in white, but with modern twists. However, the classic Victorian or mid-century attire remains the most common. This suggests that perhaps there is something about that specific era, or the way we romanticize the past, that keeps these specific spirits active in our collective consciousness. Or perhaps the sheer number of fatalities on early highways created a generation of restless spirits. Psychologically, the woman in white represents the fear of the unknown passenger. When we invite a stranger into our car, we are breaking a social taboo and making ourselves vulnerable. The ghost story serves as a warning against picking up strangers, but it also serves as a moral test. The drivers who stop are the good Samaritans, the people who want to help. They are rewarded for their kindness, not with gratitude, but with a terrifying glimpse of the afterlife. It reinforces the idea that no good deed goes unpunished, or perhaps that kindness transcends the barrier of death. There is also a profound sadness in the repetitive nature of these hauntings. Resurrection Mary has been trying to get home for nearly a century. The Lady of White Rock Lake has been shivering in the back of cars for decades. They never succeed. They never reach the front door. They vanish just moments before salvation. This implies a hellish state of existence where the spirit is doomed to repeat the trauma of their death and the futility of their attempt to return home over and over again without end. It is a Sisyphusian punishment for a crime they did not commit. The encounters often leave the living with a lingering sense of cold and dread that lasts long after the spirit has vanished. Drivers report a smell of wet earth or stale flowers that permeates the car. They feel an intense drop in temperature that the car heater cannot combat. This physical manifestation of the supernatural presence suggests that the ghost is drawing energy from the environment or the living person to manifest. It is a parasitic relationship where the living provide the energy for the dead to briefly relive their final moments. Skeptics dismiss these stories as urban legends or hallucinations brought on by driver fatigue. They argue that the monotonous lines of the highway and the hypnotic effect of headlights can cause the brain to create images to keep itself alert. They point to the similarities in the stories across different states as proof that it is just a migrating folklore tale. However, the sheer volume of witnesses, many of whom have never heard the local legends before their encounter, suggests that there is something more happening than just tired eyes and active imaginations. Witnesses who have encountered the woman in white often undergo a profound change in their worldview. They can no longer deny the existence of the supernatural. They become obsessed with finding out who the woman was, researching local archives and visiting cemeteries. They need validation for what they saw. This often leads to the discovery of real historical tragedies that match their experience, perfectly solidifying their belief. The story becomes a part of their identity, a secret they share only in hushed tones. The specific detail of the footwear is often mentioned in these accounts. Dancing shoes, high heels, or bare feet are common. These details emphasize the vulnerability of the spirit. She is not dressed for the harsh environment of the roadside. She is exposed and fragile. This vulnerability is what compels drivers to stop. It triggers a protective instinct. If she were a monstrous figure or a threatening man, drivers would speed past. Her appearance is a lure designed by the tragedy itself to ensure she gets the ride she desperately needs. Some paranormal researchers believe that these entities are not conscious spirits, but rather residual hauntings. A residual haunting is like a playback of a past event that repeats under certain atmospheric conditions. This would explain why the spirits do not seem to learn or change their behavior. They say the same things, give the same address, and vanish at the same spot every time. They are unaware of the driver. They are simply following the track laid down by their emotional trauma. They are echoes rather than intelligent entities. However, the cases where the spirit interacts, directly answers questions, and reacts to the driver suggest an intelligent haunting. Resurrection Mary has been known to be silent some nights and chatty others. This variability implies a consciousness that is aware of the present moment. This makes the haunting even more tragic because it means she knows she is lost. She knows she needs help, and every time she vanishes, she might be experiencing the realization of her death all over again. A moment of horrific clarity before the cycle resets. The roads themselves seem to amplify this energy. Highways are places of high velocity and sudden stops. The energy of a crash is immense. Metal twists, glass shatters, and lives end in a fraction of a second. This release of kinetic and biological energy might burn a scar into the fabric of reality. The woman in white is the visible scar tissue of that event. She is the memory of the road itself, projected into the minds of those who pass by. She is a permanent resident of the asphalt. In some rare and terrifying versions of the story, the driver does not stop. They see the woman and drive past, perhaps out of fear, or perhaps because they are moving too fast. Looking in the rear view mirror, they see her standing there watching them go. Then suddenly, she is in the back seat. She does not need the door to open. She manifests inside the vehicle, bringing the cold and the smell of the grave with her. She screams or whispers a warning before vanishing. These encounters are the most traumatic, leaving the driver nearly wrecking their own car in panic. The connection to water is another recurring theme. White rock like the ocean at Big Sur, the rainy nights of the Lydia legend. Water is a conduit for spiritual energy in many belief systems. It is also a symbol of the subconscious and the deep unknown. The wet dress, the dripping, water the drowning victim. These are powerful symbols of being overwhelmed by the forces of nature and fate. The water acts as a barrier that the spirit cannot cross, or perhaps it is the medium that holds them there. As we move into the modern age with better highway, lighting, more traffic, and GPS technology, one might think these legends would fade, but they persist. Dash cam footage occasionally captures unexplainable white shapes on the side of the road. Forums and social media are filled with new accounts of the same old story. The technology changes, but the ghosts remain. They are a constant reminder that no matter how advanced we become, we are still subject to death and the mysteries that lie beyond it. The woman in white serves as a memento mori, a reminder of death. She reminds us that life is fragile and can end on any stretch of road, on any ordinary night. She reminds us that our plans, our weddings, our dances, our returns home are never guaranteed. We are all just travelers on a dark highway, and we never know when our journey might be cut short, leaving us to wander the shoulder of the road, waiting for a ride that will never take us where we want to go. Tonight, if you find yourself driving down a lonely stretch of highway and you see a flash of white in your headlights, do not be so quick to dismiss it. It might be a trick of the light or a reflection on a sign, but it might be her. She is still out there waiting in the cold and the dark. She is waiting for you to stop. She is waiting to tell you her story. And once she is in your car, she will leave a mark on your soul, that will never wash away. The road stretches on interminably ahead of you. The white lines dash by like seconds, ticking off a clock. You check your mirror, and the back seat is empty. You breathe a sigh of relief, but the cold remains, a chill that settles deep in your bones. You turn up the heat, but it does no good. The damp smell of lake water or old earth fills the cabin. You drive on eyes fixed forward, trying to ignore the feeling that you are no longer alone. The highway holds its secrets close, and tonight you have become part of the story.